So we get the case, right? And what happens is we do all the interviews, and I file a motion to suppress, and it's this big, long, drawn-out litigation. And I tell the prosecutor, we're going to trial, there's not a damn thing you can do about it, it's going to be a big, ugly, nasty jury trial, blah, 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 blah. Well, the prosecutor comes back and says, ain't going to be no jury trial. I said, yes, there is. No, there isn't. Yes, there is. No, there isn't. Yes, there is. She said, well, we're going to redesignate the case as 2 misdemeanors, thereby depriving Jeff of his right to a jury trial. Now, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking you remember something about the right to a jury trial in all criminal cases. Yeah, there was something about that. But all, it's kind of like what's the meaning of is. All doesn't really mean all. What it really should have said is all criminal cases on which the state has decided to give you a jury trial. It's kind of like the Iraqi Constitution. Has anybody seen the Iraqi Constitution, written as a courtesy by the United States? It in essence says, you know, you have all these terrific protections, you know, you're protected from this and that and this and that, and absolutely, positively, no exceptions, you are protected, great rights, fundamental rights, unless as otherwise provided by law. And I can't make this stuff up. But at least they say that in their Constitution. We just do it. So Jeff doesn't have a jury trial anymore. So anyways, we continue our litigation. We have hearing after hearing after hearing after hearing. And one day, the judge takes me back in chambers in the Superior Court with the prosecutor and says, Mr. Victor, you know, I'm spending more time on this misdemeanor case than I do on some of my first-degree murder cases. By the way, that's an exact quote. And she said it to me as if it was my fault. Well, I promptly said, Judge, I realize that that's a problem. That should never happen, but this isn't my fault. I'm not the one who decided to bring this case. I'm not the person who decides to charge these cases and to arrest these people for such ridiculous things. You should be directing your questions to the prosecutor who's decided to exercise their discretion and bring these cases. Because if they're going to bring them, I'm going to defend them. The prosecutor just went like this. And we went back out there. To make a long story short, we had a long protracted litigation, and at the end of the day, throughout the police officer lying on the stand. By the way, I'll just tell you this little thing about how this went on the stand. Just one little piece of my cross-examination of the police officer. The police officer said on direct examination, as the prosecutor was asking questions, did you order him to open the front door when you went to the window, or did you just ask him nicely, like, you know, knock, 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 excuse me, Mr. Smith, I mean, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do, but it would really be nice if you would accommodate me by going to the front door, just letting me in so I could talk with you, or something along those lines. Said another way, consent, not an order. And the officer said, oh yeah, it was clearly a request. It was a request to open the front door. It wasn't an order to open the front door, which is really hurtful to my case, right? So I went up under cross-examination, properly pissed off, and said, come on, officer, really? It was a request? Isn't it true that it was an order? No, Mr. Victor, it was a request. Aha. I opened the police report, where I pulled out the highlighted section of the officer's report, walked up to the officer and said, please read this. I told Mr. Smith to open the front door. I said, you wrote in your police report that you told him to open the front door, not asked him to open the front door. Now, at that point, you would think that the officer would say, well, yeah, I guess it was a long time ago, I kind of forgot. But that's not what the officer said. To my shock, the officer said, well, it's kind of the same thing. You know, to tell somebody to open the door, to request to open the door, it's sort of the same thing. I see it as the same. I mean, at that point, I'm standing in open court in front of a Superior Court judge, and I don't really know what to say, because, you know, it's one of those things that you think is just so obvious. Do I really have to say anything here? But I'm sure I figured out something to say. But I think that I was honestly trying to communicate that in his brain, they were the same things. All right, what do I need to do here? Oh. Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay. Oh.
I'll give it a 10.
We'll give it one more shot, and then we'll
Just kill the flag.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, what the? So anyways, I've been bringing cases like the Jeff Smith case forever, just to say, look how stupid this stuff is. Is this really a good use of resources? How ridiculous, how dumb, how just crazy for you to bring these cases. But you know, guys like Michael Kielski, where are you, Kielski? He's over there. Guys like Kielski are trying to run for county attorney, making the eminently reasonable case. And I'm going to paraphrase, 'cause I don't know exactly how Mike says it, probably much more eloquently than me. Trying to say, look, before we spend any more money chasing after the Jeff Smiths, shouldn't we really go after the murderers and the rapists and the robbers? Because by necessity, we're taking our scarce resources away from the bad guys to go after guys that aren't bad at all. Doesn't that make sense? I guess it makes sense to us, but I'm not sure it makes sense to other people, and I don't know why yet. But as we've been making this argument, and what I've been sort of inferring, maybe more than inferring, I've been actually saying, guys, this is more than just a money thing. It's more than just a waste of money, because there's other costs. We're taking resources away from going after bad guys by using them to go after pot smokers. Does that make sense? How many murderers are still on the street murdering people because we're playing games chasing after pot smokers? And then came the baseline case. Right? Then came Mark Victor's favorite case. The other side of the argument. Who remembers the baseline case? Remember, who could forget? Remember, we're national news for something other than illegal immigration.
Yeah, a little
Yeah, a little intro. The baseline case. First it started as the baseline rapist. Remember, in 2005, rape after rape after rape after rape. And I say that because there were 4 rapes that occurred in a month-and-a-half period of time right around Baseline Road and 40th Street, same general area. And at this point in time, the police figure out, and so does the press and everybody else, that, you know, there may be a serial rapist on the loose, and this is a big problem, and everybody's nervous, and there's national news going on. Well, on September 20th, 2005, there was a double rape, rapes 5 and 6 in the same area that occurred. But this rape was a little bit different, because in this particular rape, the detectives went down and said, and I say this is different because this one is very important to the baseline case. Detectives went down to one of the victims and said, we would like to take some swabs and do a rape kit to see if we can gather some evidence. Would that be okay? And I try to think about the mindset of the victim at this point, by the way. You've just been raped. You haven't even showered yet. You're probably not at the high point of your life. And here comes another stranger, police officer, who says, really, I would like you to take your clothes off so I can take these swabs and start taking evidence from special parts of your body. Now, what are you thinking at that point? I'm sure you're thinking, this isn't the best offer I ever had in my life. But you're probably also thinking that if it helps catch this guy, if I can bring this guy to justice, if I can stop this serial rapist, if I can do something like that, I guess I'm in. Let me take my clothes off, detective. Go ahead and process my body for physical evidence. Great. Appreciate that. Detectives take the swabs. They take 2. They swab the right breast, and 2, they swab the left breast. Because, based on what the victim had reported, there may be biological evidence there from the rapist. The detectives take those swabs, they put them in the sex kit, they seal it properly, they keep the chain of custody just perfect, and they send it over to the Phoenix Crime Lab. And 2 days later, on September 22, 2005, they request a DNA analysis of all items in the sex kit. Both the left swabs and the right swabs are in the sex kit. Well, on October 9th, 2005, weeks later, just a few weeks later, the Phoenix Crime Lab gets a lab report that they issue that I have right here. And guess what it says? It says, guess what, everybody? On the left breast swabs and on the right breast swabs, both exists
biological material available to be tested for DNA. Just what we were hoping for, right? Great, we're right there. We got a Phoenix Crime Lab. It runs DNA. We've been taking samples of people for a long time who are convicted of crimes, and we've been putting them into the database called the CODIS database. We got DNA possibilities here. We got a database. This is good. What do? They take the right breast swabs and they test them for DNA. And they come back with an inconclusive. Sorry, can't figure it out. Maybe there's not enough DNA. I don't know exactly at this point why it's inconclusive. But not to fret, we still have the left breast swab with biological material on it, right? What do they do with that? Well, on October 9th, 2005, according to the lab report from the Phoenix Crime Lab, they put it in the freezer. And they stuck it there, where it sat for 11 months. Now, just a pause here. I'm wondering how many lab tests were done to test the green leafy substance in Arizona during that 11-month period. I wonder how much money was spent during that time period testing the green leafy substance. I wonder how many criminalists working in labs were busily spending their time figuring out if indeed the green leafy substance has THC in it and therefore is marijuana. How many man-hours and woman-hours were spent on that project during the 11-month period that the left breast swab sat in the freezer, and 8 people were murdered. From December 12, 2005 to June 29, 2006, throughout that 11-month period, while the left breast swab sat in the freezer, knowing that it had biological material on it to be tested, sat by itself, peacefully in the freezer. Now, this one I don't have good proof at the moment for, but I know it's true. And I am going to be conducting depositions of every single person involved in any way whatsoever with the baseline murder investigation. And I'm expecting to have about 3 to 4 hours of questions for each person. During that exercise, I know what I'm going to uncover. What I'm going to uncover, what I expect to uncover, is lots of evidence about the detectives at the Phoenix PD pounding the table, saying, could you please test the swab? We got this swab sitting in the freezer. Could you please test it? What I think I'm going to uncover is evidence that the Phoenix Crime Lab, in response, said back, everything that could be tested has been tested. Evidence that the Phoenix Crime Lab said back, we kind of lost it. We don't know where it is. Evidence that people said, we want to solve this the old-fashioned way. Without DNA evidence, we want to solve it with billboards and with pictures of the person and what we think they look like and with decoys on the street. That's how we want to solve it. Why do you think they want to solve it like that?
Job security.
Maybe you don't want the fact that there's DNA evidence sitting in the freezer coming to light. Maybe you don't want the DNA evidence to be the reason the case is solved at the end of the day. That's what I believe I'm going to uncover. But what I've already uncovered, and what I have here, in my little folder, is an email dated February 16, 2006, where the detectives are sending emails to the crime lab, basically saying, would you please test it? Why? Because of the, quote, magnitude of all the possible related cases and the number of victims, end quote. Could you please test it? Pretty please. We really like it tested. Second request. So finally, after 8 people are murdered,